Thank you to Linda and all organisers for today and everyone for being here. It's great to gain insights that are difficult to ascertain maybe on the surface about how different programs run and the different bodies that are involved, and it opens possibilities for other contexts. As Linda said, there subject associations and the role they could possibly play. So you've heard from Maura earlier. I'm looking at these teachers' trajectories through the professional development program, through the PDMT. So, okay, so first of all, the media is populated with a lot of reference to out-of-field teaching in Ireland. So we have half maths teachers not qualified. Secondary schools undermined by Irish teacher shortage, survey finds. Teacher shortage now across all subjects, principals warn. And ASTI, so that's the teachers union, representative of secondary school teachers union, and they put it, quite frankly, they're putting people in classrooms who aren't teachers. Now that is a side issue in itself, that we have a teacher union almost deprofessionalizing the profession. But in any case, the first one, 2010, the second one, 2022, the same for the third, and now we're at 2023. So yes, Maura talked about, and Maura's research was key to the very first one, 2010, and 13 years on, and we still are encountering the same issues. The reasons, well, fortunately, the media are also able to provide the reasons. So they say Dublin classrooms could be without teachers next week due to soaring living costs in the capital. Now, yes, the economy and housing crisis can impact on it, but may not be the sole reason, especially given how long it's going on for. And it's a nightmare, lack of affordable housing fueling teacher shortage. So again, media offering some reasons, but of course, these problems are longer lasting than just in recent times. They also offer solutions. So they say, well, the other teacher union says, let's have the masters to be a qualified teacher. Let's qualify teachers quicker. Again, there may be issues with that approach. And the calls for schools to be able to recruit on a full-time basis to address shortfalls. So they're looking for more permanent contracts in the way that contracts are organised in the Irish context. I won't dwell on it too long, but we could see we have various conflicting opinions which can almost harm the profession in a sense. But as we know, Australia is the same, the UK is the same, and Sweden the same, in the sense that this problem is worldwide. It's not solely because of housing crisis in Dublin, for instance. So I looked for various definitions of what teacher shortage is, and this was the best I could come to, I suppose, to capture it. Teacher shortages emerge in different fields and locations. So we're experiencing that in Ireland in terms of harder, where the cost of houses is impacting to some extent, where there's an imbalance between the number of teachers demanded and the number of qualified teachers willing to offer their services to fill these positions. And I emphasize willing, and I'll touch on that in the future. Teacher shortages have been omnipresent worldwide, which we know at this stage, and so too have mathematics teacher shortages. But of course, we have empty classrooms, and we can't have empty classrooms. We need to staff them. So, as we know, the solution is perhaps to assign a teacher to teach a subject outside their field of academic preparation. But as we all know here, it's not a new phenomenon. The original term from Conant in 1963, and nor is it eradicated. So a study in Ireland from Maryland, Goose and Co. into 2021 showed that it's still prevalent. So consequences, and I know Jim Van Overschelde is involved as well. So their data, I suppose, comprehensive in the sense analysis of 5 million students, and they were saying that 11% of a standard deviation below their peers taught in field. So the equivalent to putting a certified teacher in a classroom, as they put it, but have 3 times the positive effect on scores as lifting a student out of poverty. So the significant impact it can have. Ingersoll talks about 2 origins: the teacher deficit perspective, which I've touched on already in terms of inadequate teacher supply, which inevitably leads to, or may lead to, or most likely leads to, I suppose, a decrease in student performance, whatever we want to categorize performance as. But on the other side, the organizational and occupational perspective, that there are some administrative practices and organizational characteristics of schooling. And that's what strikes me about today. There are nuances in each context, but the different nuances play out, although they play out in different ways, still lead to the sense of out-of-field teaching. Okay, so from the teacher deficit perspective in Ireland, that was the approach adopted, and we said the solution here would be professional development, and it would be this program called PDMT, which would be designed in accordance with the requirements for certification. So we would impact teacher supply, this would increase, and by a byproduct of that then would hopefully be an increase in student performance. So the incidence, well, 2009 it was 48%, 2021 it was at 25%, and recently from the Department of Education their figures suggest it's at 23%. So yes, over the course of this time, out of field teaching has been reduced. It is successful in terms of incidence, and we're still at a figure that's comparable though internationally, so more work to be done. And yet there are some issues. So one of them is the impact of the PDMT on the practices of the teachers. So we have Mary. I suppose when I was 12, I decided I wanted to be a maths teacher, and it didn't really happen until now. So this was her beginning the program. I suppose I would hope to be a maths teacher who instills a love of maths in students and instills a kind of curiosity about the world from a mathematical perspective in students. Now we can see this is somebody who's passionate about teaching maths, yet on the face of it in the media, they're saying, quite frankly, they're unqualified teachers in the classroom. So as we know, it's not quite black and white in terms of out of fieldness. But after the program, she says, out qualification wise, I suppose I'm nearly qualified now, but I suppose expertise wise, I wouldn't feel like if I had to go into a higher level leaving certificate maths now, I wouldn't feel like I'd have the expertise for that. So she's saying, although she's now certified and can teach across all levels at secondary school, she doesn't feel like she could teach the most advanced upper secondary school in mathematics. So in terms of Clark and Hollingsworth's model of growth, if we have a look at Mary, in actual fact, for her, she felt it didn't impact on her teaching practices. Yes, it helped her with her knowledge, belief about her ability and confidence in that regard. But she said and as I seen from going out to her classroom, her practices remained unaltered. And she said, and I think this is touched on, maybe Jill mentioned some aspects of this, but she says, I don't think having the piece of paper, so the certification, changes your teaching necessarily. It's other things that impact on that all the time. There's very, very little emphasis on how to actually teach it, and the how to teach it will be far more beneficial, in my opinion. It's all focused on the maths. In terms of in an actual classroom, we move on to John. This was John's practices, and he said after finishing the program, he's teaching a class on sequences and patterns, and he says, all right, now again, this is where it gets a little bit hazy, if I'm being honest with you. So this is in a live lesson. He says, right, so for the time being, let's just ignore that. Let's just go on gut. Let's put the formula together the way we should do it. Now, John is to be championed as a teacher because he was teaching for 17 years before he went to undertake the program. But, we have to question how the program has catered for him. And he says to his students, now from there again, I apologize for the PN thing. So it was finding the general term in an arithmetic sequence. And he says, okay, so let's just go with our gut. When it comes to sequences and series, it's the uncertainty he has. And he says, right, it does, lads. Look, it's like this. I would say in the exam, either way will do. And if it doesn't work one way, guess what? And perhaps the students are familiar with this because they respond the other way. So it's between using y equals mx plus c and the formula for the general term of an arithmetic sequence. There is subtle differences between them, although connected. And that is something John is struggling to unpack. Is he capable of doing so? Absolutely, given the right support. So he says, do it the other way. It doesn't work one way, do it the other way. So there are the impact on their practices. I add here the willingness of teachers to stay teaching mathematics as a second component. So David says, there are a lot of scientists who are coming out without the maths background. Well, they have the maths background, but they don't fit the qualification. So a lot of teachers are doing it purely to get the piece of paper. If I was given the opportunity to do solely science, I think I would take that option. I'd prefer it. I'd be pushing towards it. And inevitably, as David is longer in his school, he will have that stability, and he may be no longer willing to take on the role of teaching maths as he moves in to teach more hours in science. And then this was John's class 1 year on after he had finished, he was still making the same errors. And he says, so lads, I want to take away x for the time being. I want to start including n because x is used for functions. So this slide actually should have I apologize, it should have come earlier, but is making the point that 1 year on, he was making the same mistakes, and he was pointing out that the pattern starts at number 0. This was to move away from the confusion he was having. So the willingness to stay teaching. This led me to the opinion that a one-size-fits-all model of professional development for out of teachers may not be the best model. In one bracket, we had one trajectory, which was about securing learning, but they go to return to teaching their in-field subject. In the middle trajectory was belonging in situ. This was Mary, who had a strong passion for teaching maths, but felt as she belonged, and so too did Catherine, but they were not moving forward in teaching more advanced maths following the program, all levels of maths. But I think we can see from some of the classroom practices, maybe that would need some consideration. So securing and returning, these type of teachers teach one maths group per week. They're identify strongly with their in-field subject, and mathematics is a gateway to preferable employment conditions. Belonging in situ are teaching maybe 2 to 3 maths groups per week. They mainly teach at lower secondary level, and they have enjoyment and satisfaction teaching maths, but maybe the program can do more for these people. And then we have a full insider. They're teaching maths to all class groups, and maths is central to their identity as a teacher, and this was the case for John. But the key finding is they're a non-homogeneous group, that some need greater support than others, some want greater support than others, and some have greater aspirations to teach maths than others. And so funneling them through a single style program may not be best. And then to touch briefly on the organizational and administrative practices of schooling. So yes, from a long-term perspective, teacher supply and maths teacher supply is an issue, but in terms of short-term for a school leader who's trying to staff his classroom on a daily or yearly basis, they may be thinking of things like succession planning. I have a good science teacher retiring. I have a good young science teacher. I will give him some hours of maths with the way contracts are done in Ireland. So I keep him in the school, but it is leading to the out-of-field issue for that teacher just on a short-term basis. Teacher seniority. So and we've seen David's intention to move into teaching his full in-field subject more full-time, even after obtaining maths certification. Subject choice. School leaders have to make a decision on whether they want to offer some optional subjects in secondary schools, as we have here in Ireland. So I might need to take on, for example, home economics teacher who I don't have enough hours in the school in the school week for them to have a full contract, so I'll give them some maths. So all of these kind of play out in terms of how out of field happens in the short term, as I describe it, and contractual obligation. So you have to have 22 hours of teaching, let's say, time in a week to be a full-time teacher in Ireland. So helping teachers or filling up, for want of a better way of putting it, those hours for their contract can lead to it. So in the US, they tried to mandate this. They tried to, in 2001, No Child Left Behind policy, it was, okay, every classroom had to have a highly qualified teacher to kind of regulate school leaders' decision-making. But of course, this was impractical and it had to be abolished, because we need out-of-field teachers to keep the system afloat. So in terms of teacher deficit perspective, we need long-term solutions. In terms of organizational, we need maybe shorter-term solutions. So this leads me to, where does Ireland go to now? Well, for the short-term problem, it's staffing the empty maths classroom. They may need a shorter-term solution. So accessible regular PD. The PDMT program is a heavy workload over a 2-year period to be qualified. But we also have that long-term program of maths teacher supply. Therefore, we need long-term solutions, and the certification pathway is responsible and important, very, very important in that way. But fundamentally, the regular PD and the certification pathway must impact on practice if they are to benefit both the teachers and the students. And that's it. I hope I'm okay for time. Thank you very much.